Okay. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa. Melissa, I believe I have screen set to share, so you can go ahead and grab your screen or however you want to do.
I'm just going to be sharing my kitchen today. So as long as I'm talking, hopefully the camera will stay like on me.
Oh, and before you start, because it's like that, I want to let everybody know that you have an option if you are on desktop to switch the view of your.
Yeah, you can pin me if you want to.
At least on my screen, it's on the very upper right-hand corner. If you move your cursor around, you'll find it in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. It'll say View. You click View, and then you select Speaker View or Speaker View.
Or if you go to like on the top where like the thumbnails of everyone's pictures are, if you go to, there's like, if you hover the mouse over my video, there's 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner. You can click those dots and there's a thing that says pin. And if you just want to see me and nobody else, you can pin me on your screen and it'll only be me taking up your screen. So that's a possibility also. So today, everyone, we are just gonna do a feature on mushroom ketchup. It's something that we've heard a lot about as far as like over the last couple of years, featured in Fungi magazine actually at one point, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. Sounded like really fun. And I figured, why not? You know, it's something that I kind of wanted to try for the longest time. The funny thing of this whole thing is that I have COVID right now, so I can't taste or smell very well. So I'm going to have to can this stuff and hopefully it'll keep for when I can actually taste and smell again. I can actually smell a little bit and I can taste a little bit, like everything is just diminished. It actually smells good from what I'm smelling so far, but I'm not sure if it's like incredibly accurate or not, because I'm not like at 100%. I would say I'm at like 10% maybe of normal right now. I encourage interaction. So anyone who, you know, has any questions as I'm going, please shout it out in the middle and just, you know, ask me, you know, how I'm doing things or why I'm doing things or whatever. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I got this recipe online, so it's there. It is kind of like metric. So I'm doing like the, you know, Americanized conversion into like cups instead of like milliliters and stuff like that. So hopefully that'll help out. And then, so what we're going to do first is obviously just like any good recipe, I'm going to go over the ingredients that you're going to need to do the recipe. And then we'll go over obviously the procedures after the fact. So what you need to start the recipe, the most important part obviously is the mushrooms. One of these containers that you can get from the grocery store that has cremini mushrooms in it, I actually got 2.5 of these. So that is 2.5 pounds of mushrooms that I started out with, the creminis. And then aside from that, I'm going to read my little list to you guys. We need 3 tablespoons of sea salt. I use this Jacobson sea salt, the kosher sea salt. 4 tablespoons of dried mushrooms. I'm not sure if Shauna Crone is on our meeting today, but I'm actually using the Grifola frondosa that I picked up last year from her that she was kind enough to give me, that we had the Devil's Lake Parade and she was handing stuff out. So thanks WMS and Shauna Crone for those. The recipe actually said dried porcini. The best thing about any mushroom recipe, in my opinion, is that you can really do a lot of like substitutions. I see there's a question in the chat. Will you share the recipe with all post-meeting? I think that we're recording this, and I'm not sure what the plan is for it, but I know usually members can like access a lot of the recordings that we have online. And I'm certainly not opposed to having this one be a public recording if anyone wants to do that. So we can definitely make it accessible somehow for our members, especially if you ask for it. So the answer would be probably yes on that, as far as I know. And then we also need 3/4 of a cup of red wine vinegar. I used Regina red wine vinegar for my purposes today. And we need 4 shallots. Mine were pretty big. I peeled them obviously and sliced them very small. I'll show you guys that in a couple minutes. Then 2 tablespoons of sugar. Just regular crystal sugar is what I use, my little bag of crystal sugar. And then you're gonna need pretty much everything in this recipe. You have to use non-reactive material. And by that, like my cast iron is not gonna work because vinegar sometimes can like do weird stuff with reactive materials. So glass is really, really good for being non-reactive. And stainless steel is actually quite decent as well. There's some debate over whether like ball canning jars are like great for vinegar or not, but people pickle in them all the time. So I'm actually going to be storing all of my stuff at the end of this in the tiny little canning jars I have. And then bottles, obviously, to store this stuff in is obviously something that we're going to have to do. I actually just sanitized mine, so they're in a pot over there. And then cheesecloth or strainer or both. Kitchen string, and then a funnel if you want it, or like something to pour with, obviously to transfer the stuff from the pan into your bottles for storage. And then the spice mixture is a different part of this. So that one is going to be like a 1.5 inch piece of peeled, grinded ginger, a small bay leaf. I, just have a big, huge container of bay leaves that I'm taking from here. Then a teaspoon of black peppercorns. My little peppercorns are just these little guys here. Then 1/2 teaspoon of allspice berries. Allspice, just like any other, dried like seasoning of any kind. If you're gonna do berries, you could do the 1/2 teaspoon that it says on the recipe, but if you're gonna do something dried when it's asking for the berries, take it in half because the dried stuff is always stronger. So I use like 1/4 teaspoon for this instead. And then 1/2 teaspoon of whole cloves. I used my little container of cloves. If you want to know what a whole clove looks like, they're kind of cool actually. If I can hold that up so you can see it at all. They're like these little, almost like flower buds. They're really neat. And they smell great. I wish I had better smell right now because I really love the smell of them. And then 1/4 teaspoon nutmeg. And you can also get that fresh if possible, but I don't have that fresh. I just have my Granny's little container of nutmeg here, which is adorable. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut up our mushrooms. And this is going to be like an overnight process. So I just want everyone to know this isn't like an automatic thing where you get to like make this all in one setting. So I took all of my mushrooms and I cut them up in about, 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, something like that, somewhere around there, so that they're all nice and thinly cut. And after they're all cut up about this size, and remember, we're doing 2.5 pounds of mushrooms, so 2.5 containers like this. I'm slicing all of them and taking them and putting them in a really, really big bowl. And then I'm going to put salt on it as I go. So this bowl, obviously, that I'm showing you here is not even nearly big enough to fit the 2.5 pounds of mushrooms in it. But as you put the mushrooms in, you're going to take your sea salt that's on the list, and you're going to do just this like light sprinkling of salt. About every like inch or so is what I did as I layered my mushrooms in. Then when all of the mushrooms of those 2.5 pounds are finally in your bowl, you go ahead and cover this with like saran wrap or press and seal wrap or whatever overnight, your big bowl of mushrooms, and you just let it soak. It's going to soak overnight, and actually like the salt is going to break down your mushrooms. And you're going to come back in a couple hours and you're going to find, wow, all of my mushrooms are kind of starting to look like marinated mushrooms or mushrooms from a can or something like that, rather than just being like dry mushrooms, because the salt starts breaking them down right away. I stirred mine maybe 3 times in between when I put them in the bowl and when I started cooking them this afternoon. So just a couple of times, you stir them up, get the liquid and that salt kind of briny stuff to soak into those mushrooms. So you leave them like that at least overnight. Just mushrooms in the bowl and their own juices just brining away. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to boil a pot of water. My water is over here. It's ready to go. And I'm going to put like about a cup of water into a bowl. And when that's all done, I'm going to grab the dried mushrooms that I had talked about earlier, Grifola frondosa, and I'm going to put 4 tablespoons of mushrooms into my water in order to soak. So a tablespoon, for those who might not know, this is a tablespoon, right? So it's like a very, very, very small handful for me. So usually what I do if I want a tablespoon of mushrooms, because these are dried mushrooms, they're very crispy. They don't have like, you know, like a lot of softness to them. So I'm kind of like gonna break them down in my hands. And that way I know like, okay, like this is just about a tablespoon of mushrooms. So I'm gonna put 4 of those in the water to sit. And this is like the next day that we're doing this, because we've let those mushrooms sit in the water overnight. And we're coming back to actually make the recipe the next day. So the first thing we're doing is we're putting the water on to boil, and then we're actually soaking our dried mushrooms. So I'm going to put the 4 tablespoons of them into the water to let them soak. But I've already done these steps, so I'm just doing this for like presentation purposes only. So I'm going to put that aside, and we're going to pretend that we've got the 4 tablespoons of mushrooms in there. And then we're going to, yes.
Did you crush up those mushrooms into like a powder or?
It's not like a powder, no. I just kind of like crush them in my hands just so they like kind of form a ball. So I know like about how much of them I have, because, you know, they're really not super pliable. You know, like a dried mushroom doesn't have, if it's really nicely dried, which these are, like it has like a crispiness to it, right? It just like breaks rather than like bending or whatever. So that's why, to know exactly how much you're getting, it's almost like grabbing a pile of leaves, like how much is actually in this bag? Right. I don't know, right? So in order to like say I've got a tablespoon, I kind of have to like squish it down in order to see, you know, what the air content is that I'm leaving behind. So that's what my thought is there. Good question. Thank you for asking. So the next thing is we're going to actually chop up some shallots. I have this tiny, tiny piece of a shallot left over that I haven't done anything with. So I'm actually going to take it, and I'm going to show you, like, I am mincing this incredibly small, like very, very, very thin slices of that. And I did 4 whole shallots that exact same way, okay? When they're all chopped up, I actually went even further and I put them into my little food processor over here. And I blended all of them up in my little food processor. And then I put them in the bowl with the mushrooms that I soaked from last night. Now, my mushrooms have actually lost quite a little bit of bulk because of the fact that, you know, they have sort of collapsed in amongst themselves, almost like, again, like a marinated mushroom or a cooked mushroom would. So I've got this pan now that's got my mushrooms, and it's got the onions in it. Everything is in there, it's simmering away. And aside from that, we had to create a spice packet to go in there, and we had to add some vinegar and some other stuff. So what else is in there? Let's go through it. So we put the dried mushrooms in there, the ones that I soaked. What we're gonna do is actually like take the stuff that you soaked, and you're gonna take it through a sieve and make sure that you're actually getting all the grit out that might be in your mushrooms. Go ahead and like pour that stuff in. And we want to keep the water from the soaking, and we want to put it in the pan. So we want to get the water in there. Want the mushrooms to go in there too, the dried ones, after they soak for about an hour. And then we can actually just go ahead and like keep cooking everything using that soaking liquid and using the mushrooms that were in there. So we want to make sure we give them a little time to soak in that water before we do all of this stuff. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put 3/4 cup of red wine vinegar and 2 tablespoons of sugar in there with all of that stuff. So I measured out my red wine vinegar. It's all in there already, the 3/4 cup of that. And then 2 tablespoons of sugar. So now in the pan, we've got the mushrooms, the onions, the dried mushrooms, they're soaking liquid, the sugar, and when I said the onions, I meant the shallots, pardon me. The sugar and the red wine vinegar, all of that is in there, just kind of starting to warm up. Now, we're going to actually take a piece of cheesecloth, and we're going to go ahead and, I just like to cut a piece of cheesecloth, usually, you know, or muslin cheesecloth, whatever you've got available. You know, this is my cheesecloth that I'm using. I like cheesecloth. And I cut a square earlier. No, it's in my dishwasher. So I cut a square that's probably big enough where I can get something into it and know that I'm going to have room. So this is my cheesecloth square. It actually does not have to be like incredibly like a high thread count. Cheesecloth is like perfectly fine to do this. It's just like stopping the cloves, especially from getting into the like mixture. Cloves are very, very, very strong. They have a good flavor, but we want to make sure that we don't get them like into the stuff. Same with the ginger that I'm going to use. So we peel a piece of ginger. We have a 1.5 inch piece of ginger here, and I'm using my grater here. I'm going to grate it and just go right on top of the cheesecloth. Let all of the ginger just fall onto the cheesecloth and just keep it in there. You know, we don't need the fibrousness because, you know, obviously ginger is very, very fibrous. It has a great flavor, but we don't want the fibrousness in ketchup because obviously the texture would not be right. So this cheesecloth is going to get all sealed up with all of my ginger on it. And it's going to just like give us a really nice texture and make us be able to have the flavor of it in there, but we're going to be able to pull out the cheesecloth at the end and still have a nice texture to this stuff. So that's our ginger. And then we're going to do a small bay leaf. I'm going to take my little bay leaf over here, and the bay leaf is going to go inside of the cheesecloth along with everything else. And then we're going to do a teaspoon of black peppercorns. So the peppercorns I'd show you guys before. It's in this little thing. So about a teaspoon of black peppercorns in there. And then we're doing a quarter of a teaspoon of allspice. Quarter of a teaspoon is a little bit exact, so I'm not gonna wing it on that one. Okay, and then half a teaspoon of whole cloves. We all love cloves. So about half a teaspoon of cloves. There they go. And then a quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg as well. So putting in for the nutmeg, all of that stuff is now in my little spice packet. So we have a spice packet and we're just going to bring up the sides, just like it's like we're running away from home as a child and tying it all in a knot, and then I'm going to put it on a stick. So I'm going to take that and I'm just tying this in a knot around here more than once because we don't want it to come untied. We don't want that stuff to like drown in our mushrooms. So now I have a little spice packet and that's just going to go right in with the mushrooms. And it's going to give everything just a kicked up flavor in there. Now we have to simmer this for about an hour and a half, which is why I've been simmering this before I got on with you guys, because it's kind of a long time. So the stuff that's in my pan right now is actually ready to roll for the next step, which is why I got it to this point. So all of the spice packet and everything like that has been in there, it's been simmering. Everything is just marinating and doing its job. And it's kind of thickening down over time. So when I first put everything in there, it was pretty thick or thin. And now everything has kind of thickened up to some extent. And I've got kind of, it's almost like a mushroom gravy that's like starting in there. I'm gonna thin that out just a little bit. I'm going to take out the spice packet when I can find it in there. And there it is. The spice packet's kind of starting to roll around with the cheesecloth. And then we're going to actually blend it to create our delicious. Hold on just a second. Okay. So cheese packet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my filter thing, my sieve again, and I'm going to take out a cheesecloth packet. I'm going to try to get all the mushrooms off it as much as possible because we don't want to sacrifice them. But so there's the string and the whole big thing of cheesecloth, and I'm going to kind of just give it a squeeze to try to make sure that we're leaving as much flavor behind as possible. All right, so it's pretty dry now. So I've taken that out of there. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of water in here, just a tiny bit to thin it out just a little, because I want it to blend a little. Okay. That was like maybe less than an eighth of a cup of water. And now I'm going to take my hand blender, which is over here, and I'm going to actually put the hand blender right in my pan. And I'm going to blend this up. So if anyone is averse to noises, might want to cover your ears or mute me for a second. But here we go with my little hand blender. to do that with the whole thing. And then I'm actually going to add a little bit more water to this because it's being a little too thick for what I want right now. But you can see that after we have blended, I have this lovely like paste kind of stuff here going on. And that, my friends, is going to be mushroom ketchup. So I would say use your best judgment. Obviously, this is very thick, right? It's like chunky. And so, you know, you can always add more water to thin things out. Probably thickened up a little bit because of the meeting I had at the time was a little bit thickened down compared to what it should have been. But I'm just going to keep at that until it's like a thinner consistency. I'm going to add more water. And so it's like, again, more of like a ketchup than like a mushroom paste. And just a little bit of a time, I would say, is probably better than throwing a ton of water in there at one time. This is getting closer to where I want it to be. So then as it gets that kind of a nicer consistency, and it might never be like super smooth, but you can see like that's nicer. It's like a thinner consistency now. So when we get it to the desired consistency, then we're going to take it out and we're actually going to put it into our cans. Those are still steaming, which is great. I sanitized these glassware earlier so that I could actually take out and put my mushroom ketchup into them. I'm going to take it and I'm actually just going to like put it into my little container without touching the container because it's sterile right now. And when this is all done, I'm going to grab one of my lids and I'm going to barely touch the sides and try to keep that sterile. And then as this cools, I just put on the lid just enough to like have it be closed, but not like super tight. Otherwise you're never going to get this lid off again. And this is going to pop the lid down as it cools. And this is going to be like a sterilized, and it'll last for months or maybe even years as that happens. So that is mushroom ketchup from A to Z. Any questions, anyone?
Is there a reason that you chose to use the hand blender versus like a food processor or a different blender?
100%. That is an excellent question. And this is going to be me giving you a commercial for hand blenders because they're excellent. They're wonderful. I love them. When you're dealing with something hot like this, I don't know if you've ever like made like homemade tomato soup or anything like that, where you've had to like take a big hot pan of something and turn it and scrape it into your blender. And then you're like pouring it all back into other things and everything. And it's like hot, it's kind of dangerous and it's kind of clunky and whatever. Having a hand blender in this situation is like so nice because you don't have to take it off the stove even. You can just blend it in place. You can thicken it or thin it like right there on the stove still as it's like cooking. And I don't have to worry about burning myself or anything like that. Hand blenders are like my favorite tool of the kitchen. They're really, really miraculous.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I know like historically mushroom ketchup actually is the original ketchup. It predates tomato ketchup, but I don't really know what's beyond that. Can you give us some insight into the history of ketchup?
Well, actually, I read in a little bit about this, and it said that essentially that because of the fact that you have to add salt to the mushrooms, it's a way that it makes them last longer because it's preserved. Salt preserves things, right? So it was something that people would do to sort of like prolong the harvest, much like anything else, that they would try to preserve. You want to have mushrooms into the fall, and fall's great here for mushrooms, but then also into the winter and like the very early parts of spring. And back when, there wasn't like, not everyone had great methods of like preserving things. They could dry things and everything like that, but canning, especially like down home canning, was best. So that is why mushroom ketchup actually became a thing, is because, just like everything else, they wanted to have mushrooms in the off season. And making a big sauce out of it was like kind of just celebrating everything to do with, the spring and summer, and the harvest months and stuff. So they would make a big, to do of it, and take everything delicious that they had. And then over time, canning tomatoes actually became really, really popular as well. And then ketchup like becomes a thing, as far as like being tomato ketchup. But there's actually a lot of talk about the fact that like salt and pepper used to be on every table, and also there used to be a ketchup container on many tables that would like come along with salt and pepper shakers. Like it would be like, little little shakers, and then it would be like a little like container, and you're supposed to like put your little ketchup in there or whatever for like whatever sauce. So that is what I've read up on. I don't know exactly how the transition ended up where tomato ketchup became so much more popular. That part, I'm not really sure, because everyone knows that mushrooms are so awesome anyway, that why would we want to give up mushroom ketchup? Like, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, so that's what I found out on it. Does anyone else here know why tomato ketchup became more popular? Like, I don't know that part.
Maybe something to do with the spoilage of tomatoes is one guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Way to manage that, because they do spoil pretty quickly.
They do. Yeah.
In the comments, Anna Demers added mycophobia.
Yeah, that actually is like a really good guess, probably.
Especially with it being blended.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, mushroom ketchup, not as hard as I thought it was gonna be. Like, honestly, yeah, I mean, it takes a little bit of time, as far as the fact that like you have to soak the mushrooms in their own juices overnight and everything. But this is the first time I've ever made it. I didn't do a practice run because I had COVID and I was sick all week, and I figured, whatever, we're all gonna learn together. So honestly, smells nice. I think it probably will taste nice. I'm going to put it on a steak and see how it tastes. It's going to be good.
Mm-hmm. So just a quick addition to the whole tomato thing. So the ketchup itself, like apparently, if you go way back in time, it was like a fish sauce, and it was like a salty anchovy kind of sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And sailors used it, and they brought it to like the Americas, and they brought it to Britain, and brought it all over. And so mushrooms, like that was a way to have like a spice ingredient that you could put on anything, kind of like Worcestershire, if you will. And so, and then in 1817, the Brits started using tomatoes because they could can them and they had easy access. And then that came over to America, and then it really became popular, especially with Heinz 57, because there was 57 ingredients.
There you go.
And I just also want to say one other thing, that I've made mushroom ketchup a bunch of times. Don't use pheasant back.
Oh, I didn't use pheasant back.
I know, but I'm just saying, I know you did, but I'm like just telling people, if you do it and you use your wild mushrooms or whatever, don't use pheasant back, because it's got that cucumber taste. The cucumber taste really messes it up.
Yeah.
Like, everything else tastes pretty good, but the cucumber taste is like, oh.
I could see how that would be pretty gross. Yes.
Yeah, it did not work. But hey, I'm all about failure once in a while.
Yeah.
You can't, if you don't, learn from your mistakes.
I was thinking about using black trumpets instead of my Taki today too. So feel free to try your own variations on this. I've got chicken of the woods in my freezer too that I could make a ketchup out of too if I wanted to. So I think it would be fun to play with this a little bit and try multiple variations on it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and what's nice though is that I don't know, did you go to Costco and get your creminis from Costco?
No, just my local grocery store.
Because they have really good prices usually, and you can go in there and get for $6 you can get those really big containers of creminis, and so not a bad way to go. Thank you so much, Melissa. Did you want to did you have anything else you wanted to share with us today?
What's the question?
I said, do you have anything else you want to share with us?
No, but there was another question. Who has a question?
Oh, sorry about that.
All right, I've got a question. In the chat, it talks about canning and water bath, and I'm not quite sure. Now, do you have to put that in a hot water bath to preserve it yet?
Yeah. So in order to get it to, I'm gonna have to dunk it one more time. So the first bath that I've done is where I'm sterilizing the glass, right? So that is going to be the first part of it. Then when everything is done, because I still have more work here to do, obviously, I have to blend that up, get it to a nice consistency, and then get everything in the jars. Like I said, you just barely put the lids on or whatever, because when you put them under the water the second time, which I have to do still, to bring everything just back up to temperature, because the air in there and everything like that also has to heat up. It has to be completely sterile, right? So you have to do the second dunk. And it's usually only 15 minutes that you have to do it for. So it's not a long period of time or, an investment or anything like that. But you also have to do that while the vessels are hot, because you don't want to boil them when there's two ways to do it, but anyway, doing it while they're hot is best, because then you can like bring the water up to a boil really, really fast and like get them in there. And you don't want to like put them in cold water while they're hot because it'll crack the glass, right? Same with like, you don't want to put cold stuff. If you do ever let anything cold and then you're going to put them in a water bath, you have to actually, like when I initially did the sterilization of these, I put the little cup in the water while everything is room temperature, and then I let it all come up to temperature together. I'm not putting the glass in cold as the water's hot, right? Because again, that can shatter your glass. So you have to keep that in mind as you're doing that. But yeah, I'm going to give them a second bath.
Don't confuse pasteurization with sterilization. You will not attain a sterile product on the inside without a pressure canner.
Okay, you know what I'm saying though. It's
well, there's two different things there.
Okay, for canning purposes, this is the age-old way that you do it. You do a secondary water bath.
Hey, Melissa.
Yeah.
That was an excellent presentation. I recorded it, and I'm going to put it up on the WMS YouTube channel after this. So if you can email me the recipe, I'll put it in the notes for the YouTube video.
I sure will.
Also, in the chat, Tavis recommends everyone check out Townsend's. It is a channel on YouTube that discusses the history of mushroom ketchup.
Is that the one that does like all the oldie time stuff?
Yeah, he works exclusively out of cookbooks from the 1700s into the early 1800s. He's got 1,000 videos. His mushroom ketchup one is very popular. He shows how they made it in the, I don't remember what year the recipe was, sometime in the 18th century though. And he
does a bunch of stuff though. It's not just mushroom stuff. It's other stuff.
Great channel.
Well, I'll find that video and I'll also put it in the notes for this video when I upload it.
Okay, so I think we are ready for our mushroom pub quiz.
Woo!
Yay! Drum roll, please. All right, everybody.
We are Wisconsin Mycological Society. Check out our website and social media. We're an affiliate of the North American Mycological Association.